The story begins with the heroes group invading the Demon King's castle and seeing the invaders. The Emperor ordered them all to attack together, and while the protagonist prepared his stunning magic, he heard the Demon King saying that if any of them join his kingdom, he will give everything his new subordinate wants. Naturally, the hero was confident that no one in his group would accept betraying humanity, but different from what he imagined. The protagonist accepted without thinking twice and used his stun magic to arrest his companions, and right after that, he swore allegiance to the Demon King. Of course, not even the Emperor himself thought that his offer would be accepted, so seeing this bizarre scene in front of him, he was surprised, and before he could recover from his shock, the human traitor asked him to sign a contract instead of something verbal, and seeing the Demon King hesitating, the protagonist acted like Kazuma, and said that an emperor could not go back on his word raw, and since the Demon King didn't want to sully his name, he ended up signing it. Afterward, he had his subordinates arrest the hero's group in the dungeon, and was quite excited that he had captured the hero, and that he had made the great mage Kaldrash become his subordinate. And seeing his new servant acting submissive, he asked why the mage decided to betray his own race, and upon hearing his question, protagonist began to remember the past. A year ago, at the beginning of the journey to defeat the Demon King, he was very happy, since he was hanging out with a strong and cool hero who was 6 years older. They were very close. The future savior of the world even called him brother. But that changed on a certain day, when the hero almost died to the demon Mephisto, one of the 4 great monsters of the Demon King. Because of this defeat, he was traumatized, and almost gave up being a hero. However, of her dear companions did her best to comfort him. She tried really hard, and naturally, they ended up hearing the voice of the night comforting the hero, and that lasted for several days, as the future savior said he was still traumatized. And because of in addition, they ended up getting very close. At first, the protagonist thought that those two loved each other very much. A few days later, he realized that it was not as pure a love as he thought, since the martial artist also started to comfort the hero. That future Salvador got addicted to receiving affection from his companions, but until that part, the protagonist could still pretend that nothing was happening, since he wasn't the only one outside. But a few days later, he had to be alone in the room, and while heard the voices of his companions, he said that until a few hours ago, he didn't think that things would reach this stage, since if a nun did that kind of thing, she would lose all her holy power, and to prove that she really did that. The next day, her sacred power was very weak. Of course, the protagonist was pissed off by the fact that the nun had lost much of her power in exchange for a few nights of comfort. And thanks to her power being weaker, they had to spend a lot of money on potions, and since then, he had to keep quiet and put up with them. He was forced to give his share of the winnings with the excuse that it was for the good of the whole team, and for having refused, the fair began to say that he was selfish for only thinking about himself, and that made him angry since it was their fault for spending so much money on portions because of her. It wasn't just the fair that blamed everything bad that happened on him, the others did the same, no matter how hard he tried. In the end, they all screwed up and blamed him. Then answering the Demon King's question, the protagonist said that he had been thinking about leaving that group for a long time, so he just took advantage of today's situation to leave that team, since he is a selfish person who only thinks about himself. Now he will forget about his past and will live peacefully, but there was still one thing he was curious about his former comrades, and that was what the Demon King would do with the hero's group. And answering his curiosity, the Emperor said that he will cut off their heads and hang them in a high place, to increase the morale of his subordinates, and hearing this, the protagonist said that it would be better to keep them alive. Naturally, the Demon King was irritated by his idea, since they were the assassins who tried to kill him. Then the mage must have a good reason to want to keep them alive. Upon hearing his threat, the protagonist said that a person becomes a hero according to the Oracle God. So naturally 2 people he can become a hero at the same time. But if he kills the future savior, another will soon appear to take his place. In short, unless the Demon King doesn't kill the hero, there will be no saviors of mankind left to face him. And the idea of killing everyone and only leaving the hero alive would not be good, since it would be better to keep everyone alive, because then the savior will still have reasons to stay alive. They have to keep his lovers alive, so he has false hopes, and since the hero is the hope of all humans, the Demon King will hold the hope of humanity in his hands. Of course, the Emperor accepted this excellent offer. The next day, he was ordered to hide his face for a while, just to avoid any unnecessary trouble, and the upside of having betrayed humanity was that he got a beautiful maid available to him around the clock. And right now, Camilla was showing him the training field, where they were having a duel between the Death Knights. Unlike the red skeleton who was more on the defensive, the blue one wasn't using a shield. He was only focusing on attacking, and with his great speed of attacks, the Blue Death Knight managed to cut off his opponent's head. Of course that wasn't a problem, since Death Knights don't die just with that. And with the end of the duel, a girl noticed the presence of the protagonist, and ordered him to take off his hood and reveal his identity, and doing what she asked, the Knights of Death realized that he was the great magician Kaldrash, and they did not understand what he was doing in this place. But different from the skeletons, the girl was not surprised by his identity and asked if it was her father who forced him to join his army. Hearing this, he realized that she was the daughter of the Demon King. To his surprise, she said that she heard that he was strong, so she would like to duel against him. Of course, he wasn't excited about that, since he didn't like doing things without getting anything in return. And it wasn't good either, seeing a beautiful girl wanting to wring his neck, and as he had no other option, he ended up accepting, but with the condition that this was not like the Death Knight's duel, where one of them had to lose his head to finish. Upon hearing his condition, the girl accepted easily, and while the protagonist was relieved by this, and made some jokes about her situation, he felt awkward, noticing that she wasn't laughing. Instead, he ignored her joke, and said that whoever attacks first wins, and even if he dodges of his first strike, he won't dodge everything. Anyway, so he has to be prepared, since he might end up getting hurt, unlike the protagonist who was taking everything as a joke. The Demon King's daughter decided to use all her power, out of respect for him being a great mage, and since he didn't know what kind of abilities the Demon King's daughter possessed, he was kind of worried, so even if she is weak, he decided not to let his guard down. But he also couldn't use all her power, otherwise she would end up dying. But ignoring his concern, the Death Knight whistled the beginning of the duel, and at the same moment, the girl appeared in front of the magician using her great speed. But before she crossed his head with her spear, the protagonist easily dodged the attack. But even though she couldn't land the first blow, she continued to deliver several attacks, but the mage dodged them all easily, so when loading his mana on the staff, he shot his lightning magic at the girl. But as he used little mana, she managed to defend herself and was annoyed that he is taking it easy with her. But she was also quite excited to see for the first time a mage handling a melee so easily. Even though he wasn't a normal mage, she was confident in her victory, and decided to give it her all in the next attack, and said that if he keeps taking it easy, he won't last long. And seeing her all confidently going towards him, the protagonist took his staff with one hand and threw it towards her as if he were throwing a baseball, and even getting surprised by the fact that he had thrown his staff, she managed to easily defend herself against this surprise attack. At the same time, the protagonist charged his mana in Kamehameha style, and taking advantage of that, the girl attacked him, but before she managed to hit him, the mage did a small whirlpool in his hand, and with that whirlpool, he managed to block her sword, and while the mine was without reaction, seeing her blade being sucked, the protagonist held her arm and said that he will show her the power of a great mage. Thus, using his other hand, he attacked her with a blow that at first appeared to be a Rasengan. In the end turned out to be a beautiful Kamehameha. While they were surprised by the defeat of their princess, the Death Knights asked if the protagonist really was a mage, and he replied that that was how he learned to fight as a mage, and if he wasn't a mage, he wouldn't be using one staff. After witnessing some of its power, the girl said that she misjudged the strength of mages. She will not repeat that mistake in the future, and when the protagonist got ready to lecture her, he ended up seeing something amazing, which made him mesmerized, and not paying attention to her apology, and without noticing the look in his eyes, she started to vent, saying that all the people around her said that women were weak, so they always ignored her and thought that she was weak, and in that she kept talking. But from that point on, he didn't understand anything else she said, since that big and beautiful Sugoi Dekai in front of him was driving him crazy. He even started hallucinating, and in that the girl finally realized that he wasn't paying attention to what she was saying, and as she looked where he was looking, she was extremely embarrassed when she noticed that her blouse was torn. Then it shows the Demon King asking for confirmation if the protagonist met his daughter, and seeing that his boss seemed irritated, the protagonist said that she was the one who kept insisting on dueling with him. He had no intention of leaving her in that state. When he heard in response, the emperor said that his daughter wants to become the strongest demon, and one day become the queen of the demon world. Naturally, she likes to challenge strong people, so he can't understand how a person so skilled to the point of defeating his daughter with a single blow makes such a mistake. And hearing his boss's threat, the protagonist was terrified, as it seemed that the Demon King was irritated because of that wonderful accident, so naturally he apologized. But other than that, he waited. The Demon King accepted his apology easily and said that he has something to ask of him, and as he was feeling guilty, the protagonist said that the emperor could ask for whatever he wanted, and the Demon King gave him an important mission that involved magic, so to make up for his earlier mistake, he decided to do his best and asked who was the person his boss wanted him to kill. Later in the Beast Village near the demonic castle, it shows the protagonist carrying a large amount of magic, and the maid being surprised by her master's skill, and finishes charging her mana. He used his wind blade magic, and seeing her skill by finishing the job with a single coup, the maid's surprise increased, but different from what you might imagine seeing this scene. The protagonist was actually just separating the rice from the field, and the reason the maid is surprised was because he was cutting everything in a clean way and fast. Of course, the protagonist wasn't happy with using his power to separate the rice from the field. He wanted to be using his skills on the battlefield. Later at dusk, it shows the protagonist in the village inn's room, frustrated at having to do such a humiliating job for a mage. And while he thought he would be demoted because of that wonderful accident with the Demon King's daughter, he hears someone knocking at the door of his room. When he ordered the person to enter, a beautiful fox woman opened the door, entered the room carrying a tray of food, and thanked him for helping her tribe in the rice field. At the same time, she said that she brought some wine, and also a little snack for him as a thank you. But as eating alone was something sad, she came to keep him company. At the same time, it is explained that the fox has not seen her husband for a year, so she was getting it was increasingly difficult to contain a fox's desire, and in a small village, a rumor of a married woman with a big appetite would spread quickly. Because of that, she tried her best until today to hide it. But upon meeting with the mag earlier, and receiving help from him to get up, his appetite surpassed the limit that he could handle. So not being able to control his desire any longer, the fox went to the wizard. So after eating lunch and drinking a little, the protagonist said that the night was much better thanks to her, and the fox also said that he was feeling the same way when asking if she was single. The fox said that as a husband, he was recruited by the Demon King a year ago, and he still hasn't returned. So sometimes she feels lonely and ends up drinking alone. Since it was difficult to drink with someone from the city, as she is a married woman, she wouldn't want there to be embarrassing rumors about her. But with foreigners that's different. It doesn't matter what they talk about while they're together, or if they make a small mistake. They could easily pretend that nothing happened at all. To her, what happens when you're drunk should be forgotten, and it's also good to have a friend who drinks and knows how to keep secrets. And one of her secrets was that since her sugoi dekai was big, she felt her shoulders hurt, and understanding what she was meaning, the protagonist asked if she wanted a massage. Naturally, she accepted, and thanked him for his help in this difficult time. And what she meant by difficult time, it was the heat of a fox, and feeling that odor emanating from her. His tent ended. Getting up and perceiving this, she became very excited, and jumped on him. At that moment, the protagonist realized that he was prey in front of a hungry fox, and as he expected, she kissed him and said that if he didn't feed a hungry fox, he will be a bad person, and as the protagonist was not a bad person, he fed the poor fox that she wanted so much, and because of the noise, the maid ended up seeing him feeding the fox, and also wished fed by its master. Guys, if you want the continuation of the journey of the strongest magician who betrayed the hero's group in exchange for a harem in the Demon King's kingdom,